Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. So let's get right to it. I'm very honored to have with me Gareth Browne. Hey, Gareth, how are you?
I'm well, Dane. How are you?
Great. I am great. Thank you for asking. Anyway, you seem to be in a civilized part of the world for a change. You've been on the show several times. You're always in the thick of it. So we're going to talk about the United States and what the hell is going on. So let's just start there. What the hell is going on?
Well, I think the main development at the minute is it seems this MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding, which the Iranians a while back to open up the Straits of Hormuz to international shipping traffic, has really broken down. I think it's a case of both sides being fed up with one another. America has still been striking targets in Iran, and Iran has been harassing and stopping traffic in the Straits. So there's a complete breakdown of that MOU. And just in the last few days, President Trump has come out. How he's got this new scheme, I guess, which is basically going to be, traffic looking to go through the Gulf will now pay essentially a protection tax to the US. This is despite Marco Rubio having explicitly ruled this out, just a month or two ago. So the talk is Trump is going to levy a flat tax of 20% on all traffic going through the Straits of Hormuz, um, which sounds simple and effective, maybe at first hearing, but actually when you delve into what that would mean, it probably add $17 to the price of a barrel of oil. It will increase the Iranian incentive to attack ships passing through the straits, and we haven't even gotten to how much it's going to increase insurance shipping costs. And so in comparison, a sort of Iranian Omani system wherein you're actually paying your protection fees to the Iranians and Omanis looks relatively like a bargain. But it's still quite a kinetic area. We had just this morning in Dubai, two Emirati ships were attacked. One seafarer was killed. And this is one of the most important waterways in the world, and it's still very much a sort of active conflict zone, and nobody's quite fit to fully open it in a manner that pleases the United States, Israel, Iran, the GCC states, UAE, Saudi, Qatar. It's an unsolvable problem at the minute.
Yeah, but okay, but this should be very clear. The Straits of Hormuz were opening and operating just perfectly before America and Israel attacked Iran, right? Let's just be very clear about that. So, this is a problem that has been caused by the war. And once again, I want to be very clear. I want regime change in Iran. I'm not a supporter of Iran. But this whole thing about the Strait of Hormuz, we've gone from to me the real problems in Iran about lack of democracy and freedom and authoritarianism and nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles and all that kind of stuff. That's not even discussed anymore, right? I mean, it's just all about the Strait of Hormuz. So let me ask you this question: if the Strait of Hormuz were to be opened, is that victory for America?
It really depends on the circumstances in which it's open. But I think for now, it's like the big change now is like compared to, let's say, 6 months ago, is closing the Straits of Hormuz. An Iranian regime move to do that was sort of seen as like the nuclear option, and that if they were to do that, it was almost like pressing the button on a suicide vest because it would provoke such a strong response from America, from the international community, from the West, from the Gulf states. And they did that, and actually the international community has sort of been found wanting because it hasn't really been able to do anything about it. So I think it showed that the whole world was sort of underestimating Iran and the IRGC. Now, if you manage to get some sort of deal wherein the straits are opened, the fact is you've put this weapon in the hands of the IRGC. They can close it at any point, with the knowledge that actually, for military, strategic, or political reasons, the response isn't going to be that great as long as the regime remains. Its staying power has far exceeded anything that I think anyone expected. So we're in a completely different world now, where opening the Straits of Hormuz doesn't simply flick the conversation back to democracy in Iran, the IRGC, the nuclear program, Iran's proxies around the region. It's a completely different book we're reading from now.
And so, Trump keeps talking about how, the American military has obliterated Iran's military. So if that's the case, how can Iran still have the capability of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, I guess you can compare it to like defending the Gulf states against drone attacks. The drone attacks which have been plaguing the UAE and Qatar and those other Gulf countries in the last few months are very, very cheap. It's very low tech stuff for the Iranians to do. Yet it costs exorbitant amounts and very, very high tech to defend against, whether it's Patriot missile batteries or whatever. You're using $2 million missiles to shoot down maybe $2,000 drones. So there's a kind of complete asymmetry there. And I think something is true of the Straits. Iran can really close straits with very little like physical deployment. It doesn't need to send an armada of ships. We've seen it's mined the straits in certain areas. It's a very easy sort of low budget thing for Iran to do, but just the mere act of saying, the mere words of saying the straits are now closed has the effect of closing them because it scares off insurance companies, it scares off the international shipping firms who, they have a tolerance for risk, but they're not sort of um, suicidal in a business sense. So it's less about military strength and military might and more about strategic maneuvering and positioning. And even if you have the muscle to beat back the Iranians, it doesn't mean you can actually just forcefully open the straits. So much of it is out of US and Western control.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this practical issue. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but everyone talks about. Some people say, well, okay, why don't these ships just take the risk and go through the straits? Well, a tank, trying to go through the straits. I imagine if it's fully loaded, that cargo is probably worth what, $100 million, and so if it gets sunk, the insurance companies have to cover it. So who's willing to take $100 million risk, right, just to go through the straits?
Yeah, very few. I mean, you have a handful of insurance companies who are more bullish than others. Um, but even the most bullish ones are not going to, give the green light for merchant vessels and oil containers to sail through those straits. It's just not how the world works. You might be able to get some through with sort of state-backed insurance plans, but that doesn't really seem like a viable solution to really fully opening up the straits. Maybe you can get a handful of strategic vessels through, but it's about business, it's about money, it's about economics and finance and insurance premiums at the end of the day, as much as it is about security.
Yeah. So let's talk once again about Trump. So Trump's come out and said he's going to basically a security fee to help tankers through, assuming if insurance companies and others will go with it. But isn't that? I mean, it's just crazy to think that America wants to charge to protect ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know. Just something kind of sits funny with me about that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unsustainable economically and financially. If you really like looked at how much it would cost to sort of escort every single ship through the straits, it doesn't come close to being sort of economically sustainable. So it's not going to work in that sense. And you know, I think this is a problem actually that a lot of the Gulf states, the Middle Eastern states, are starting to grapple with now. They're looking for alternative routes. The Saudis have a pipeline that goes across to the Red Sea, which has sort of been reactivated. There's talks of the Emiratis building a pipeline which would go across land to Oman. We're seeing the Iraqis trucking fuel out through Syria to Latakia and into the Eastern
Hmm.
Mediterranean. Talks from the Americans and the Gulf states of building a big pipeline from Kuwait all the way to the Eastern Mediterranean through, a very different Syria. So, um, this Trump scheme is not sustainable in the long run. It's just not going to work, and I think everyone sort of knows that. To be honest, I think even the people around Trump know that. And so you really are actually somehow it seems that the United States is the only country not looking at this in a strategic sense. All of the Gulf states are starting to make, other plans. The Iranians, obviously, we can see their strategy. It's you have a chokehold on the world by opening and closing the Straits of Hormuz as and when you like. And um, Trump doesn't. He seems to be the only one not thinking in a strategic sense.
Well, I mean, just practically speaking, if there was a pipeline, a new pipeline's built, and going up through Syria or whatever, I mean, we're talking many years before that even happened. So we still have an immediate issue and a concern. I mean, strategic. Well, first of all, I would argue that Trump saying that is for political reasons to try to convince the Americans, hey, we're going to make money out of this. We're going to recoup the cost. I mean, I just think it's one of those blowhard things he likes to say, which just it's never going to happen. Um, so, what do you think is the long-term play? What's going to be the end of this conflict?
I still think we don't fully understand the situation in Iran well enough, and I would say that the the dust it may seem a lot calmer, but really the dust in Iran hasn't settled. Not completely yet. They've been absolutely pounded from the air in recent months. The High Command has been really wiped out. Okay, the regime has proven a lot more resilient than anyone expected, but we still don't have a sort of prolonged period of peace or quiet or calm in Iran, which will sort of allow the Iranian people to, I guess, make up their mind about how they feel about what's just happened. Don't forget, last summer we had the 12-day war between Israel and the Iranians and the US, some US involvement, and it took almost six months, just under 6 months, for these massive protests in Iran to erupt and millions of people to take to the streets, and we saw just how willing the Iranian regime was to use deadly violence against its own people, massacring them in their tens of thousands. Now, I think I won't predict this is going to happen, but I think we cannot rule out some internal civil unrest in Iran, but that will not happen as long as the war is perceived to be continuing, which I think from an Iranian point of view, okay, it's not as intense as it was a few months ago, but still the war is continuing. The Iranian people haven't really caught their breath. So I think this is going to be really interesting. Um, this moment where a sort of a tentative calm or peace prevails over Iran, gives the people, some breathing space to figure out, who do we blame for this war? Who do we hold responsible? Do we blame? Because as it's going on, we hear about this sort of rally around the flag idea, and even people who weren't really pro-regime, when Iran is getting bombed by the Israelis, and Americans sort of rally around the regime's flag. And that tends to dissipate when the war is perceived to have been over. And then the Iranian people really make up their mind. Were we dragged into this by this Islamic regime? Do we actually hold Israel responsible? Do we hold Donald Trump? It's probably a bit of everything. But if we get to that period of calm and the Iranians decide, actually, you know what, this regime is going to keep dragging us into these conflicts, which most of us don't want to part in, then I definitely wouldn't rule out some sort of civil unrest in Iran. And that's how the regime is going to fall, right? The regime in Iran is not going to fall from outside. It's not going to be toppled by military action. This is not Iraq. It can't be toppled from the air. It will be toppled by the Iranian people from within. And we just haven't had a sustained period of calm for that to be possible yet. So that's the thing I'm sort of looking most at. That's going to tell us where this is going to go.
But prior to this conflict, I mean, we had, as you pointed out, we had Iranians in the street. They were protesting. You had Trump say, "Hey, we'll come help you," whatever, and no one came to help them. I mean, if I was, and then tens of thousands of them were slaughtered by the IRGC. So if listen, I do agree with you. I think that the regime change is going to have to be internal. But is any country going to come to their aid to help them make that happen?
Um, I think it's unlikely, but this kind of international sentiment can change quite quickly when there's like wanton violence against people. Now, something to remember from the protests that sort of erupted at the start of this year in December and January is there was obviously Israeli involvement there. And we saw this sort of Mossad/CIA plan to to train and arm the Iranian Kurds over the border in Iraqi Kurdistan, and it sort of fell flat on its face. And then we've seen the reporting from the New York Times in the last few days about Ahmadinejad, the former mayor of Tehran, who had been turned into something of an Israeli asset, it appears, and he was being groomed to take over in some sort of internal coup. So the US and Israel were, international brokers who were very, very interested in stirring up some form of regime change, but the strategy they had just completely failed. So I think, yeah, for now it's very easy and probably correct to say, look, no Western nation really has a is that invested in wanting to, I don't know, put boots on the ground or really stir things up or introduce a no-fly zone or anything like that, which might help a renewed protest movement. And I think the Gulf states also sort of have reckoned with this idea of like, we don't trust the Iranians, we don't trust the IRGC, but look, it's our neighbor, we have to live with it. We have to deal with it. We have to try and make good with it because frankly, it's not going anywhere. But if there was to be a renewed protest movement, if we were to see similar levels of violence against civilians, against protesters, these things can change quickly. What's the old maxim, Dane? You know it better than me. There are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades worth of change happens. Right? This stasis can change very quickly in the face of wide scale violence, which we know the Iranian regime is very willing to use against them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Well, let's talk real quick. We only have a couple of minutes here. Let's talk about our great country of Lebanon. What's going on there? I mean, what's going on with Hezbollah? What's the possibility of some changes and reform there? Is Iran still playing in the country? What's up with there?
Yeah, there's a few shifting dynamics. I think the issue of Hezbollah and its arms has just become an increasingly polarized issue. And really, I think it's a big change where very few people are ambivalent. Either hardcore supporters, mainly from the Shia community, are very pro Muqawamah, pro resistance, and then the other part of the country is very, very anti Hezbollah for various reasons, and upset and perceives Hezbollah as having dragged the country into unnecessary wars. I think what you're seeing more. It was always known as Lebanese Hezbollah, and I think increasingly it's becoming Iranian Hezbollah. There's a far more hands-on approach from Tehran to controlling its proxy. Okay, the cannon fodder, the foot soldiers are still Lebanese, but all the decisions being made by Iranians, all the commanders are now out and out IRGC officers. So that's an interesting sort of redefining of Hezbollah. And
Listen,
potentially,
I hate to interrupt you. I've got 30 seconds here, so
yeah.
give me 30 seconds. So tell me what you think in 30 seconds.
Well, look, what we're seeing within the Lebanese army is an attempt to recast Hezbollah as an Iranian organization, not a Lebanese one. And for me, that makes it easier for the Lebanese government to confront them. Not full all out head on, but gradually, bit by bit. And I think that's the most likely path for a weakened Hezbollah and a stronger Lebanese state.
Well, listen, excellent. Listen, Gareth, you know the region, you know what's going on there. Your wisdom is always great to hear on the show. I appreciate it. Listen, safe travels to you. You're always in the best places to tell us these stories, and I appreciate your time.